Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Nowadays, though, for too many postal workers, the rounds mentioned in their famous old slogan have taken on a deadly new meaning. Now it's rounds as in ammunition. Arlene, for example, is the widow of Ron Williams, a postal worker shot in the head by a fellow mailman last summer in California. Shirley Mace's husband, Don, committed suicide last March by putting a gun to his head in the post office where he had worked for more than a decade. Mr. Mace was one of 5 postmen who committed suicide last year in the state of California alone. Tracy Sanchez of Oklahoma was 5 months pregnant when a mad mailman named Patrick Sherrill committed the 3rd deadliest murder spree in our nation's history, killing 14 people, wounding 6 others before taking his own life. Tracy, who's also a mail carrier, hid in the closet to avoid his murderous rampage. Critics charge that the last couple of years has witnessed an unprecedented epidemic of post office violence. Postal employees are attacking fellow workers and others with everything from their fists to machine guns. We'll try to figure out why as we investigate death by special delivery. Mailroom Murder and Mayhem are the focus of this edition of Geraldo. I want to start right out on location at a post office in California with a terrified man's frantic call to 911.
Escondido, 911 emergency?
Yes, this is the post office, 1770 East Valley Parkway. I got a carrier with a gun going crazy. Please, someone hurry.
You got a carrier with a gun?
With a gun, yes.
All right, where exactly is he?
He's in my lobby, in my back workroom space.
All right, what's his name?
John Taylor.
And does he have any history of drugs or anything?
No, ma'am.
What kind of a gun is it?
I don't know. I'm in here with my door locked.
All right, your name, sir?
I'm Bob Henley, the station manager. Please hurry.
This urgent cry for help was made minutes too late. Letter carrier John Taylor was on a bloody mission. When it was over, 3 people were dead. Before heading out to the post office where he had worked for 27 years, the once mild-mannered, well-liked postman shot and killed his wife. His route then led him to his Orange Glen office, where he gunned down fellow postal workers and friends, Ron Williams and Richard Burning. Taylor's rampage in August of last year came on the heels of the death of another California postal worker, Bill Camp, who was forced to retire after 30 years on the job. Depressed and coping the best way he knew how, Camp eventually gave up and hanged himself.
They forced him into retirement. The supervisor who was harassing him said, I'm going to force him to retire if it's the last thing I do. People heard it.
Post office is a stressful job. I mean, we're under time restraints all day long. I mean, it has been and I think different people have problems with it in different ways.
Except for special occasions like the Christmas crunch, when you look around even a big post office like the one here in Manhattan, the job doesn't seem inherently stressful. I mean, the pay's not bad, and the job is certainly a stable, secure one. But take a closer look at how human hands now have to compete with machines that move with lightning speed. This job is changing. The pressure is building. And apparently too many postal workers are being stretched to the breaking point.
I'm mad. I'm definitely mad at management. I feel that they could have done something to relieve the pressure, the stresses that we have every day.
33 just passed over the First National Bank.
Was it these same pressures and stresses that prompted Massachusetts mailman Alfred Hunter to hijack a plane and spray the streets of Boston with an AK-47 machine gun in June of 1988? Or New Orleans postal worker Warren Murphy to hold his ex-girlfriend Carol Smith hostage for 13 hours and shoot 3 other employees after becoming aggravated with a supervisor. And never forget one of the most notorious of the post office killers, David Berkowitz, better known as the Son of Sam. Back in 1977, Berkowitz terrorized New York City, murdering and maiming young women. Today, he's serving over 300 years in a New York State prison. And finally, what about the case of Patrick Sherrill, the 44-year-old postman was told by his supervisors to shape up his performance on the job. So how did he respond? He armed himself with heavy automatic pistols, walked through the employee entrance of his job, and started firing. He shot his supervisor first. And when he was finished his shooting spree, 14 co-workers were dead. Sherrill, Taylor, Camp, Hunter, Murphy, Berkowitz, different men, with one thing in common. They had all served their time with the U.S. Postal Service. Is there a connection? We'll find out. Aside from survivors of these various post office tragedies, we are also joined today by Ed Dunne of the National Association of Letter Carriers. He was a personal friend of mailman murderer John Taylor and Taylor's victims. Congressman Jim Bates of San Diego, in whose district that bloody incident took place, is here also. He's been holding hearings, trying to figure out what it is that's going on here. While Dr. Mark Haffey, a San Diego-based psychologist, counseled the survivors of John Taylor's murder spree. Arlene, did you know John Taylor, the man who murdered your husband?
Yes, I knew him very well for many years.
Is it fair to say that Taylor was a friend of Ron, your husband?
He'd been a friend and a co-worker for 15 years.
Is part of this terrible tragedy the fact that you can't understand how your husband's friend and co-worker could kill him?
It's a question without an answer, as far as I can see, that the connection between my husband and him as to why he would shoot my husband, other than I think John didn't know what, he'd been driven to the point he didn't know what he was doing at the time he did it.
Let me read you part of the note that John Taylor left. He left it for Jeff and JJ. Are those his sons?
Yes, my son went to school with his sons.
If you get this, I'll probably be dead. It's for Jeff and JJ in case I have a funeral to help you get there. I'm sorry I've just done what I've had to do. I'm hurting a lot for my age. I have only pain to look forward to. I'm really ready to go, and these, let's call it jerks. He uses a much stronger word. I'm really ready to go, and these jerks have given me a reason. I'm not crazy, just old-fashioned. If you have any questions, see Bob Rutledge. He'll explain. Don't let this destroy your lives. I love you all. Love, old Dad. Who's Bob Rutledge?
He's another mail carrier who had been there for many years, and he was also he had been an officer in the NALC, who my husband was the president of.
But what was his beef? What was John Taylor's beef? What made him so angry that he would kill people who he had befriended?
They all worked together, and they were pushed beyond their endurance, I guess.
Do you believe, as some critics maintain, that Taylor was pushed beyond the breaking point, pushed to homicidal madness by the job?
Well, because I know my husband had put him up for the carrier of the month, and John was proud of the record that he had, and he was well-liked, and he got to the point he gave up his lunches and all this sort of thing in order to maintain this. And that's a hard way to go.
Arlene, do you hate John Taylor for what he did?
I feel he didn't know. He wasn't responsible for what he did at the time it happened. So I try not to hate, because hate only hurts the person who's hating.
Shirley, do you blame your husband Don's suicide on the job that he held?
Absolutely.
Tracy Sanchez, do you blame Patrick Sherrill's mad, murderous rampage, 14 dead, 7 injured, on the post office he worked for?
Absolutely.
Let's take a break. Death by special delivery, our focus. We are investigating why these acts of violence are occurring in our nation's post offices. Stay with us. by special delivery, Mailroom Murder and Mayhem, our focus. May I read part of Don's suicide note?
Yes.
I know this is painful, but I think that it will help focus our discussion. By the time you read this, I'll be dead. I plan to shoot myself in the head at the Poway Post Office on Saturday, 25th, 1989. The reason is simple. I'm tired of giving up things after 10 years just to get to start once with no bills or money problems. First, why did Don choose to kill himself at the post office?
First off, he planned this apparently for several months. He got into full dress uniform, and he did this because he felt like he wanted to make a statement. Number one, he felt like it was too late for him, but he was tired of all the harassment, and he felt as if he could call attention to his death, that perhaps he could make it better for other people. He planned this very carefully. He sent over 300 letters all over the United States, and he planned them to arrive Monday when people got there. I watched them take my husband and chip away at him piece by piece. And as far as I'm concerned, the post office hands were on the gun. I'd like to just tell you about the harassment that I experienced, if I may. First off, I'd like to say I'm a real estate agent and have been in real estate for 20 years and have a good background. Before I married Mace, I felt like the rest of the world. Boy, these mailmen, they have it made. They're out in the sunshine, walking around in their cute little shorts, making $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Must be nice. And I think that's the general opinion of the public. However, I wasn't married but a very short time when I personally experienced the harassment. My husband came home one day with this paper. He was written up, and on the paper it said, "From now on, you will go to the bathroom on your own time. Either your 10-minute break in the morning, your break in the afternoon, or over your lunch hour." Well, this was totally unbelievable to me. I couldn't believe in this year that this could be happening. The next thing that happened, I came home over my lunch hour, and I approached the house, and there was a gentleman standing in my driveway like this. And he was clocking my husband. Now, first off, my husband was the most conscientious man around. I have documentation from the restaurants in the area. He would take 8 minutes for a 10-minute break. The waitresses knew when Don Mace came running in there to have his iced tea ready, he would run to the bathroom and out, and he only took the 8 minutes. The same way with over the lunch hour. He would set the timer for 20 minutes, and he was the most conscientious man in the world. He would never take a minute from the post office. And so he was very nervous about this gentleman being out there. And I said, "Well, what on earth do you have to worry about?" And he said, "Well, surely the thing is they won't tell the truth." The next thing that happened is I had been out with the flu a couple of days, and unfortunately he caught the flu. He called in sick this particular morning, and they told him, of course, he'd have to have a doctor's note to come back. The next thing that happened, he was in the bathroom being ill. The phone rang again. I answered it, and one of the gentlemen said, "I want to talk to Mace." I said, "Well, I'm terribly sorry, but he's ill at the moment." And he shouted a few obscenities, and I hung up. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my front door, and this man said that he wanted to see my husband. I said, "I'm terribly sorry, but he's ill." He pushed past me, walked into my home, into my bathroom, and watched my husband being ill. Well, at first I was shocked. I couldn't believe this was happening. Then I walked into the bathroom, and I said to him, "Get out of my house or I will call the police." Now, everyone says, "Why didn't you call the police then?" I was shocked. I couldn't believe this was happening. So I called the post office and I said, "If anyone ever comes to my home again, I will not only call the police, but I will press charges."
There's nothing, in my opinion, Tracy, that can forgive Patrick Sherrill for what he did. He was, at least that day, a monster, an inhuman slaughterer of innocent people. But do you allege that he was, in the same way that Shirley is describing, harassed by the post office? What did they say to him?
His first 30 days, he was cursed at and reprimanded in front of other employees, which was humiliating to him, and he had a very hard time because they don't train employees to do employees correctly. And he was getting a lot of wrong information, and they began to harass him. And before his 30 days, I went to his supervisor and said, I don't believe this man can take the pressure like maybe I can take it for somebody else. And I don't think he is intentionally screwing up. And the supervisor called him a curse word and said, I am going to get rid of him as soon as I can. So I was very surprised that later they hired him. And then apparently somebody from high up put some pressure to hire him. I think they were under the impression he was a 10-point bet or something. So when they did hire him, they said, well, we're going to harass him till he quits and resigns.
They said that?
It was common knowledge in the whole office.
Did Pat Sherrill give any indication to you or others in that post office in Edmonton? Is that? Edmond, Oklahoma, right. That he was going to be violent? That his reaction to the alleged harassment would be violent?
One guy that cursed him out told the inspectors that, the inspector said, what did he do after you cursed him out? And he said nothing. He just walked away. I noticed the last 2 weeks before he did it, because we worked closely on the same route together, that he was terribly depressed. And I didn't see it as being crazy. His clothes, his appearance, everything, I could tell he was very depressed, and he was not as friendly towards me as usual. And they had turned the air conditioner off in the middle of August, and everybody was very hot and irritable, and it was bad. You could feel it. A lot of people I've talked to said you could feel it, something was going to happen.
Where exactly were you when he entered the building with those machine guns?
I was at my post.
Did you see him firing?
Yes, I did. He shot the man next to me who fell in front of me.
When that happened, obviously your first instinct must have been survival.
The first thing I said was, this makes sense. The first thing I said is, yes, I understand it. I believed it. Even though I'd never seen violence in him, it made sense that he would do what he did because he was under such pressure.
And he fired, and fired again.
Mm-hmm.
You were 5 months pregnant.
Yes, I was 5 months pregnant.
Baby, okay?
It's been hard.
How are you?
After 3 years of fighting and going through congressional hearings and finding no changes, I feel despair.
Despair.
They have harassed me. They constantly...
Don't feel despair. I want you to feel courage now. I want you to feel that someone is going to do something to make it better.
When I went to Congress afterwards, they began to... they harassed me from the day when it happened. They said, you will come back to work tomorrow, after I come out of the closet. And then they told me 5 days after it happened that I should have bounced back. And I was running a fever for 2 weeks, and from being frozen, it hurt to breathe, every day, and I couldn't lift my hands, and I was trying to explain this to them. And they said, you are using your pregnancy as an excuse. They tried to change my work hours. They told me to go home without pay. They said, you did not sustain an injury. You're all right. And when I went to Congress, and they began to keep a file on me, which is one of the things they did to Sherrill. They will take an incident and they will stretch it beyond belief and add to it and build such a case.
It sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. I've got to pause here for a commercial. We're going to bring in the union representative, the psychologist, talk again with the congressman. We're trying to figure out why these things are happening. Death by special delivery is our focus, and we'll be right back. Listen to One point I have to make is that we invited the U.S. Postal Service to send a representative, an official representative from Washington, to be on the panel. They declined, but Deborah Bowker, the Assistant Postmaster General, did fax us a letter today, and Dr. Haffey, let me read it to you, at least part. It's a pretty long stretch to attribute irrationality of tragic actions like employee murders and suicides to stress in the post office. You examined and spoke with and counseled the survivors of the Escondido post office tragedy. Do you agree with the Assistant Postmaster General that it is a stretch to attribute that tragedy to stress on the job in the post office?
Well, I think we all are shocked by this type of tragedy, and we want to basically make some sense out of nonsense. We're just left with a big why and a lack of understanding of what happened. And I think that we have to be careful. We can't attribute it to just one factor, because nobody can say John Taylor isn't around, but certainly there are a lot of factors contributing to that particular situation, not just the Postal Service. There were developmental issues. He had an abusive childhood. His own sister killed his father with a gun, which kind of, you could assume that there was an issue of molest there as well. There was some indication that there could be an alcohol problem. There was.
You're saying John Taylor was a sick man?
I'm saying John Taylor was a man that didn't utilize choices that he had an opportunity to take advantage of.
Ed Dunne, you knew him. Was it job-related, or was it because John Taylor had a bizarre and troubled life?
I would have to say that I strongly feel that it was very much job-related. I think the pressures of the job, the way the system ran, the intimidations, no escapes to really try to resolve your conflicts that took place on a daily basis on the job, really drove him to this, because, in my opinion, we're talking about a man that was well-liked and well-loved by a lot of letter carriers in that station.
It would seem to me that with all the alleged dictatorial actions by supervisors, perhaps it's time for the United States government to get out of the mail delivery business and put it into private hands.
Well, sir, I don't necessarily agree with that. But what I would offer is what I think that I, as a local representative of the letter carriers in the northern part of San Diego County, are trying to advocate, is that what we would really like to see happen is for Congress to come in and really conduct a full investigation into the Postal Service from the top to the bottom. And what we're basically looking for is to go after the waste at the highest levels of management. I mean, we're talking about regional postmaster generals being transferred $200,000 interest-free loans to move from one area of the country to another. Locally in San Diego now, they've spent, I added it up the other day, something like $61,250 to send supervisors through to Dale Carnegie to try to teach them human relations skills. Now, next year, when our contract expires, they'll be blaming every letter carrier and clerk nationwide because we want a 1 or 2% wage increase.
We have another union representative from the East Coast.
Howdy, I'm in New York City. My question is, can stress start at an early age, at home, family, social life, and then culminate on the work floor, on the work site?
No, let me ask you, Shirley, wasn't there other things going on in Don's life? Was it strictly the post office?
Yes, it wasn't just strictly the post office. He had a major car accident in 1979 and was in excruciating pain all the time. When he went back to work, his doctor requested a push cart. They refused to give it to him. I took him to doctors and applied for disability because he was really not fit to be working on the job.
He didn't get the push cart?
He never got the push cart. Never.
Tracy?
I don't think privatization is the answer, because what I have seen and I have witnessed and I have kept up with is assault by supervisors, threats, pushing, shoving, and things like that. And what do you do when this happens to you? Well, the union usually handles more of the technical type things, what your rights are. You have an EEO process. They say, well, go to EEO. Well, EEO...
Equal Employment Opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's all within the post office. If this EEO officer does a good job for some employee that needs it, then the upper management won't let him do that job anymore. They'll stick him back on the carrying mail. And then Then you have postal inspectors that you can go and say, these are the witnesses, this guy was assaulted, there are witnesses, and the inspectors have no authority to do anything. They put it back to management. And until you can get rid of these managers are still there, even though it's been proved that yes, he did hit this guy, or yes, he did have 15 sexual harassment complaints on him, and then a year later had 11 more on him. He is still supervising. That, to me, they need to clean it all out. And I don't understand why the headquarters is not taking these people where it is proved that they assaulted a carrier or something and clean it up.
We'll ask Congressman Bates, but first we have to take a break. Stay with us. Let me get some quick reactions from you guys. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to say that my heart goes out to these three ladies. I don't think that there's a letter carrier across this country that would feel otherwise. You have to understand, though, that we are 800,000 employees. We're under one national agreement, that's true. But that agreement, from state to state, and maybe even branch to branch, I know that I live in New Jersey and I work in New York. And the national agreement is interpreted differently by management and by the shop stewards. I think that in New York City, as far as the union goes, we have the best representation for the letter carriers in the country.
Is stress the reason these people hurt themselves and others?
I don't believe that the two that went on the mass killing, I think something snapped inside their head. I think they're psychopaths, and they went and they did this, and I think they would have done this if they were in another occupation being harassed also. You know, nobody faces more harassment than the letter carriers. We have these ladies here, over here, that I'm sure get their Social Security checks, their pension checks, and we have to go out there, and if we ain't got it, we get harassed and stressed. But you have to learn to deal with these things. And, you know, we are in an age of automation and equipment, and maybe management in the Postal Service should take a look at this, that there's human beings putting the mail into these machines, and there's human beings on the other end taking the mail out of these machines, and the carriers have to case this up. You know, so I believe that, you know, maybe management, and I hope that maybe at the next contract negotiations in September, that they may sit down with our union, and maybe let's try and deal with each other on a more humanistic basis.
My name is Bob Zatorsky. I'm a night rider at the biggest post office in the world, FDR Station Grand Central. We have 900 carriers under one roof. We begin our day at 1 o'clock in the morning preparing this mail for delivery to the customers in the morning. Well, stress. I mean, this is Manhattan. You got to get it out there yesterday. Never mind tomorrow. Yesterday. But we managed to do it. We're tougher. We're New Yorkers. We deal with stress every day. With crime and everything. We're mailmen. We're going to get the job done. We're going to get a job done right. So forget privatization.
But what about this? Wait, come back. You spoke very eloquently, but what about that stress you mentioned? Is it possible that that's what's leading to these assaults? That's what's leading to this violence?
There are a number of supervisors and management personnel who think that when they become a supervisor, they become God. I am a doctor. You are not sick. You will come to work. That's right. If you get hurt on the job, you will get written up. You will face disciplinary action. If you got a broken leg, walk it off. Okay?
Congressman Bates.
Well, I think
we're hearing these complaints from these fellows. Granted, there are 800,000 of them, men and women, and neither snow nor sleet nor stress is going to stop many of them. But can Congress do anything?
Well, I think
the job is that big to stop.
Congress has been doing something, and things have been changing. And while it's not privatization, it's certainly not a government subsidy anymore. There are dramatic changes in the post office, and they do a heck of a job. And I think the public is really spoiled. We have some problems getting the mail delivered, but we pay 30 cents for a first-class postage stamp. In Japan, it's 47 cents. In Great Britain, it's 35. In Canada, it's 32. I mean, all over the world, they're paying more. Now, I think it's partly related. We're not paying enough for that junk mail. But just, for example, in terminating someone, they're a large employee. They have 800,000 people, but they have an old system that has to change, the old personnel system.
Well, you can't fire someone. And so they will drive them out, you know, as a way they try and do it. And that's creating a lot of this pressure.
You mean drive them out really by harassing them?
Absolutely.
The way they did to Pat Sherrill?
Sure.
Is that
but that's not everyone. There are a lot of good people doing the job and a lot of good supervisors, and that's not the issue. But where you have these problems, both with supervisors and employees, the means used to try and achieve the end, it doesn't work in the system, so they create their own process. Okay.
Well, I certainly don't want to belittle the post office because I like them and all the agencies. But I want to say this. Why don't they have more rehabilitation institutions for people that commit these crimes? Now, I lost my husband in service, and I blame the judicial system for all of these fanatics that go on. How come, Congressman Bates, our judicial system is like a Wild Western country? Anything goes.
Well, that's a good point, and I thought I was at a town hall meeting here for a moment.
Sound like one of your constituents.
Absolutely, but that's the point I'm trying to make when I keep hitting on this 800,000 and how large it is. Most of the large institutions in this country don't work well, and our legal system is one that needs dramatic and major reform. We have the best legal system money can buy. But if you don't have the money to make it work, you may not get justice.
Wait, Arlene
she makes a good point.
What'd you say?
I said if you don't have the money, you can't buy it.
Justice. Be right back.
I understand that these are very tragic stories, and we all understand that it, could be the stress in these particular people's lives that made them commit these crimes. But I don't see any evidence that there's anything so intrinsic about pressure at the post office any more than it would be in the police department or, a job working with nurses at the hospital or anything like that.
That's exactly what Deborah Balco, the Assistant Postmaster General, said as I read on. We don't believe the degree of stress is any more than for any other deadline-oriented, time-sensitive service industry. Don't we have a cop? Who works with the police department? You? Is that your point as well?
My point was, when I worked with the Orange Police Department in New Jersey, and when we'd go down the street and make a drug bust, okay, the postman would be right on the other side of the street. And we'd have, they'd be delivering mail when we're in the middle of, flagging down a whole street, okay? I mean, the other night I had a nightmare about my partner getting shot, okay? But then I could turn around and talk to Captain Father Murphy, okay? Or try and talk to a psychiatrist with my work about it. Who does the postman get to talk to when he has, when he sees somebody, a little kid getting shot, or somebody getting their doors kicked in and he's standing right there? Who do they get to
Well, what I would like to do is paint a picture. I'm not going to sit here to anybody and deny that there's not stress in other occupations. Certainly there is. But the stress, what makes the stress so different in the Postal Service, and basically, I want to speak for the West Coast, because I'm in a unique situation here because I did carry mail right out here on Long Island for about 8 years before I transferred out to California.
Get to the point.
But the point I want to make is that it's clock stress out there. We're piled up with many amounts of trays and trays of mail. And what we've got out there is unrealistic time pressures that we have to keep casing. Now, what John Taylor, where they painted him as such a model carrier, which he was. He was an outstanding letter carrier. And he was basically doing his route between 8 hours and 8 hours and 20 minutes. Since his tragic death, they've had experienced carriers on that route who are basically taking close to 10 hours every day to do it, which might give you an idea of the kind of stress that this man put himself under to carry that route.
I want to go to Tracy here, following up on the other thing that the officer said. Are you getting the help that you need? You seem, lots of people come on our show and they get stage fright or they're nervous, or reliving these things makes them depressed, but you seem, I don't want to embarrass you, but you really seem very, very strung out in a sense. I don't know.
I had an employee 3 months ago shake his fist in my face and threaten me in front of a supervisor, and nothing was done about it. They've continually messed my paycheck up. It's just a harassment thing, and what is different to me than other jobs, because I have worked other jobs and I was in the military for 4 years and it was nothing compared to the post office, because most people are professional And when they discipline a worker, they talk to him, they don't curse, they don't get like this, they don't say the F word, I will get you, like the post office will do. I have been threatened, I've been said, would you like to go on the back dock and straighten this problem out? By a Marine, an ex-Marine supervisor asked him if I want to go on the back dock to straighten something out. I've had plenty of jobs, but I have never been treated in this way, and including in the military, it was never like that until I worked for the post office.
How are you?
Because right now they are not paying me, I feel at the end of my rope. And I feel like I have felt suicidal. And I don't feel it was problems from other things. It was when they messed my paycheck up last. And I called them and I said to them, if you don't bring me my money, I'm going to blow my brains out. But before I do, I'm going to write about you, and I'm going to write everything so I don't die in vain. And
don't you know that they're not worth it?
I know, but how did I get in such a state of mind? What put me in such a state of mind?
Take a break.
You know.
Death by special delivery is our focus.
I would tell you, hon, why don't you get advice? If I were you, I would quit that job and go on to something better than getting aggravated. You have so much experience with your air service or whatever you were in. Go away from it. You don't need it. Your kids need you, right?
This has been my career. I love the post office.
Change your policy on life.
But who wants to hire me when they ask, the post office is going to, what kind of recommendation?
The post office, get a different job. Be happy with something else.
I'm trying.
Yeah. I say the same thing. I mean, you worry about your pension and stuff. Your pension ain't no good if you're dead. You're talking about killing yourself.
I want to say, having lived in Europe where the Postal Service is always on strike, that these guys deserve a round of applause because we would not be able to be one day without them.
My heart goes out to the three young ladies. I wanted to say that everybody's not like this on the job, and I don't want everybody to think that mailmen, clerks, and carriers are out to kill people, all right?
In fact, nobody asked me, but my cousin Carlos Rivera is here. He's a postman. Stand up, Carlos. He's the oldest son of my father's younger brother. He's all right. He's okay. I mean, that's cousin. There's one thing I want to just read, and I want Congressman Bates to respond. Where do you put it? Again, from the Assistant Postmaster General. We experienced a 53% decline in employee grievances in 1989. True?
Well, he's just playing with numbers. They write up a lot of people in San Diego, give them suspensions. In fact, the GAO study shows that they do it more severe for less offenses. But the real challenge of the 90s will be managing people. And the post office is really increasing the productivity. One of the few areas in America where productivity is really on the rise, and it's in the post office. And I think that's to their credit. But I think managing people and learning how to get the most out of them, and we can't lay all these terrible things and say just because they were in the post office. But we can say that if you put someone with different expectations maybe than a policeman, where they're not looking for excitement or violence, but you put them in this environment, and then in particular cases there's undue stress, there is a correlation. And whether we can't lay it all to blame, but we've got to change the way we manage our people. We've got to get more out of them. They've got to be more involved in the decision.
Can I just ask you, since you got involved in this particular issue, inspired obviously by the tragedy in your own district, have you received a lot of mail on it?
About 2,000 letters. And I've learned a lot. And hopefully we can put this to work now. And I tell you, really, until this came up, I didn't even know what was going on in the post office.
Arlene?
My husband was the union representative president for 15 years. Of the 16 years he worked at the post office, and he wore out 3 typewriters making complaints. And he paid the ultimate price. He died for trying to make the conditions better. And I hope and pray it was not all in vain.
Yes, I just wanted to say real quickly that I helped my husband write up grievances, over 100 of them that never reached their destination. And secondly, the majority of the postal men have 10-hour territories that they're expected to do in 8 hours. So the way they survive is they're forced to either give up their breaks and their lunch hour. A lot of them go to the bathroom at the side of the road in Poway, eat their lunches in their cars, or they trash the mail. There's a lot of it. I'm a real estate agent, and I pay for the bulk mailing, and mine, I picked it up. It's trash. So everybody finds their way to survive.
I wish they would throw away my junk.
Yes. When he was off, it took 2 different people to do his territory. No one could do his territory in the amount of time that he did it because he ran, literally, and drove himself.
Stay with us.
For transcripts, please send $3 to Journal Graphics, Geraldo Transcripts, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Or call 212-227-READ.
Death by special delivery. Dr. Haffey, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to encourage Tracy or anybody else throughout the Postal Service that's experiencing a level of stress to utilize that opportunity of getting help through your Employees Assistance Program or through a private therapist of your choice, but, to find out that you do have choices in how to deal with this.
And listening to everyone's comment, what you really have to do is believe in yourself and have that strength within yourself. And that way, life goes on. You take it from there.
I hope that these stories, these tragedies are not in vain, and I hope the show is not in vain. And I would, take this opportunity that the unions, postal management, postal employees need that this should be addressed, and maybe, like I said once before, through contract negotiations or something this coming September, that this is an issue that's brought up and that we could find ways to deal with this and,
a lot better life. Arlene, final thoughts?
Well, as I say, my husband spent 15 years. He got into the post office about a month out of the military, and he saw the need, and he said he never thought he'd be a part of a union, but he saw that there was a contract existing that was not being followed. And as I say, he wore out 3 typewriters, filing grievances, and worked with that the whole while. And I know one of the last things that he made is he turned the presidency over to the other president, that he hoped that he could feel that he had made a difference. And I hope it was not all in vain.
Your husband has made a difference, Arlene. And thank you.
I hope.
Shirley, thank you. Tracy, we love you, honey. And we only want to hear good things now.
Okay, you heard good things?
Yep.
You said through winter, sleet, and snow. Well, we did it through a massacre, too. We went to work on the very next shift. And a lot of us